Welcome back to another weekly Forex forecast, traders. I am FX Telepath, and I have been doing these forecasts for the past 5 years, never really changing anything except for this week. I decided to add the S&P 500 as well as Bitcoin to forecasts for this week and the upcoming weeks to come. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you stay tuned for those added markets. But as always, we will start with the most important market, which is the DXY, the US dollar. As you can see, we reacted the past couple weeks. I've been talking about this weekly demand, which is inside of this overall monthly demand, as you can see those dotted lines, and we are so far getting a nice reaction off of it. We tested the weekly demand once, came back in for a second test, and we are reacting off of it. Now, typically, I don't put too much faith in a second test. So, for example, if price pushed up to this supply, I could see us getting a reaction off of it, but for a second test, I never trade those second tests. The only reason I believe that this second test worked is due to the fact that we are inside of a monthly area of demand. In my opinion, that is why we are going up. And these are demand zones I've been calling out on my forecasts publicly for the past many months now. So make sure you go back to confirm that with the video evidence. Now, I've been getting a lot of comments. Oh, no way the dollar's going to go up. The dollar's going to tank. Every time price comes back into this weekly demand zone, I get tons of comments on my videos saying, wow, you're so wrong. The dollar's going to tank. And I mean, we're going up. So the question now is, how much are we going to go up? We will have basically a couple things to look at here. On the daily time frame, right now, this daily trend line is breaking with the candle closing above the trend line. Now, there still is 2 hours and 25 minutes left at the time of this recording to see. I will definitely say it's looking very weak, or strong rather. It's looking weak for the trend line. It is looking like it is going to break right now. But we have a supply zone to get past as well at 99.80. So in my opinion, if we keep pushing up, we have this supply to get through, and I think it's a high probability that we do see a reaction off of this supply zone. The question is, how big of a move are we going to get off of that supply zone? Since the monthly demand is in control, technically, a monthly demand is stronger than a daily supply. So I'm actually expecting this supply to break. And the reason I think it's going to break is because we'll be most likely pushing up to this weekly area of supply. But until that until that daily supply breaks, I'm not going to be, super bullish on the DXY. Another thing we could be monitoring is this 4-hour chart. We have a beautiful 4-hour upward trend, basically visualized by this upward trend line. As long as this 4-hour trend line's holding, I think looking for longs on the dollar, at least on like a 15-minute time frame on the US dollar pairs, or even a 5-minute time frame. I think these time frames long the dollar are going to be our higher odds situations this week. It doesn't mean you cannot short the dollar. I'm probably going to be pointing out some shorting opportunities. I like to point out both sides and just tell people to be aggressive or less aggressive with trade management. But for now, we have a nice trend line to the upside. We definitely want to be monitoring that trend line. Even if we pull back all the way down to this demand zone, it's kind of an old zone, but I want to see a reaction off of this liquidity. Then I think this zone could work at 97.04 because it's kind of an older zone. But this week, we definitely want to be monitoring this 4-hour upward trend line. And as far as the 1-hour chart goes, it's actually quite interesting here. I'm actually going to tighten the zone up just a little bit, but we clearly broke this very nice 1-hour trend line that we had, and we are basically just floating almost in the middle of supply and demand. So on this 1-hour time frame, if you want to look for longs on the dollar, we could be simply just waiting for this 1-hour demand zone for longs at 98.78. That is a possibility. And also, if we do push up to the 1-hour supply zone, I think we definitely could see a reaction off of that 1-hour area of supply. And if we break the 1-hour supply, at that point, I'm going to be just definitely more bullish on the dollar. Basically, breaking this supply zone is definitely a clue to suggest we will be breaking this high, which will give us a new 1-hour upward trend. And what will that tell us? Well, in my opinion, that will tell us that this daily supply is the next thing to be contacted and that we could potentially be breaking it. All right, looking at the forecast for the euro US dollar on the weekly time frame, clearly a lot of momentum and trend to the upside. However, it looks to me like we could start to fall off here with profit margin easily down to this weekly demand at 1.09. On the daily time frame, we did break the daily upward trend line, and that's why it's a little bit more confusing right now. Because basically we're sitting right between supply and demand. And it's a little bit tricky when that is the case because we want to be shorting at higher time frame supply and be buying at higher time frame demand. But we simply are not in that, and we don't even have a trend. So all short trades, the profit margin is down to 114, and then all long trades, the profit margin is to the daily supply at 1.17. Full disclosure, we did get a nice move off this supply, but this supply, I'm not going to get into detail on the strategy, but this supply was basically a supply zone after it was reacted. So this was not a trade. I'm always honest with my trades and the setups we call out. This was not one of them, but it's just a zone that we had to draw for the sake of my chain analysis. So when we're sitting in the middle of supply and demand like this, what do we do? Well, we have to look at pretty much on the 4-hour trend. And right now, all I'm seeing is a very nice looking 4-hour downward trend. We do have some new demand down below, but I really do not love this demand zone. I don't like when we have a supply zone, we whip right through. And if we pull right back down now, I'm really not loving the zone. This is just based off my experience. Whenever we get like really tight trading action like this, where like, let's say we pull down on the demand, let's say we break the demand, now there's supply. It's usually whenever we trade in a range like this, quick pullbacks to the zone, it's usually not going to be good. So this to me is evidence that that could be taking place. So what I would like to see for a long trade off of this demand zone is I need to see a bigger move. Something like this. It doesn't have to be one big candle. I just want to see a bigger retracement up, then a pullback to the zone. That would make me feel a little bit more confident in the zone. If we get a quicker pullback, then what I would be doing is looking for 15-minute day trading confirmation inside of that 4-hour demand zone to confirm our entry, because I just don't have the best feeling about the zone. If you want to be shorting, as long as this 4-hour downward trend line's holding, you could be shorting on a 15-minute chart. If we break this demand zone and preferably the low, any supply zone there is going to represent a pretty good shorting opportunity on the euro US dollar. Now that 4-hour demand zone, it's actually better represented on this 1-hour zone. This 1-hour zone is much more cleaner. Not only did it remove a downward trend line, but it removed an opposing supply zone as well. So if you want to view it on the 1-hour chart, this would be our 1-hour demand zone long at 115. But remember, it is counter trend to our 4-hour time frame, and it is counter trend to our US dollar bullishness, right? So you got to be careful with it. Again, if you want to get in long at these zones, I would be very aggressive with our trade management, meaning I would be looking for a 1-to-1, or I would be moving my stop loss to break even, as soon as I feel comfortable and as soon as I can. Alrighty, on to the forecast for gold, XAUUSD. Gold is on an absolute tear lately. We have pretty much not even really created any quality demand until this zone down here at 30.93. I'm not sure if we're going to get a pullback down to the zone. However, right here, we have a monthly area of demand. So if we do get a deep pullback on gold, I think this is as low as it's going to get. I don't think we'll really be dipping below the 3,000s. I think if we do get a deeper pullback, this is going to represent a great buying opportunity for, for day trades, swing trades, and even long-term position holding, even holding physical gold. So just pointing out a long-term position opportunity down there if we do get that pullback. So far, really not seeing any evidence to suggest that we could be pulling back. However, we have a daily, the issue here is all these daily zones are very, very low quality, almost not even really that great. But if you want to wait for these zones to be hit, if you feel more comfortable, these are our daily zones that we could be waiting for. And what you want to be doing inside of them is looking for H1 confirmation. And all that is once our higher time frame zone is hit, we want to wait for trend lines to be removed, or we want to wait for opposing supply zones to be removed and then trading the demand zones along. That is when we contact these daily zones if we do. So if we do get deeper pullbacks, those are the daily zones we could be seeing reactions off of. And if we get a very deep pullback, I think we could pull back below 3,500 again and react off of the monthly area of demand. Now on the 1-hour chart, we are clearly getting some sort of momentum shift here. We do have a 1-hour downward trend, and it's not the best trend ever, but clearly it's a momentum shift right now. We do have a drop-based drop here. I'm not going to call that supply just yet. I don't really have it as removing anything. However, to me, if we break this, that's going to be good evidence to suggest we might be breaking above the high right there. Now, on the 4-hour chart, it's actually much more clear than pretty much any of the other time frames. We have a very nice 4-hour upper trend line, and that's really what we will be basing our trading decisions off of. I know a lot of you guys are probably day traders. Let me know in the comments down below. But we do have a nice 4-hour trend line here. So as long as this trend line's holding, I think looking for longs on a 15-minute time frame is completely fine. Let's say we break the trend line, Then we want to hold off on longs on a 15-minute time frame, wait for this 4-hour demand zone to be hit, and then we can continue to look for longs. And that demand zone is located at 3,900. It's a pretty decent rally-based rally. Again, none of these zones, even this one, not my favorite zones. That's why I think they kind of broke. But again, if you want to look for confirmation in them, I think it might be a little bit better. If you want to trade counter trend, and listen to my words, it is counter trend. Counter trend is always typically, from my experience, going to be a lower odds trading decision. So if you want to trade counter trend, that's fine, but I would be aggressive with trade management, meaning if you short at this zone and you see a move like this, I would probably look to lock in profits or at least sell like 75% of my position, or take my stop from my stop loss to break even. That is how we are aggressive with trade management, and that's what we want to do at counter trend short trades. Sure, this thing could absolutely do this, but then you're basically saying, oh, that weekly trend and that daily trend, yeah, that's coming to an end. I'm just gonna completely predict the end of this trend. I don't like doing that, especially when we're at all-time highs. It's very difficult to predict. So that is our supply zone for shorts. It is very aggressive, and if we remove it, any demand zone there is going to be a great buying opportunity. So I like the 4-hour time frame here. It's much more clear. You want to monitor the demand zone and the supply zone, as well as this 4-hour upper trend line. All right, on to the forecast for the S&P 500. Sounds weird saying it, but I just added it in. I'm excited about it. So if you guys want to follow my forecast for the S&P 500 every week, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single forecast. And if you're liking the video, make sure to hit that like button as well. Be much appreciated. So obviously, very bad day for the S&P 500 as we've absolutely tanked here. However, I just wanted to give a little bit of perspective. We have a very nice weekly trend, and I mean, look at this move, right? It's really nothing crazy, and we've seen it before, and we just continue to rally up. So it's not really a worry of mine, especially as a long-term S&P 500 holder. I'll just continue to buy the dip, even down at weekly demand. So it is looking weak, I will say. However, the higher time frames are still looking strong, in my opinion. On the daily chart, to me, it seems like whenever we push to all-time highs, I just don't really see any quality daily zones. Even on like gold, it's just been difficult to get. So unfortunately, I don't really have any daily zones here. However, the trend is still looking very strong, regardless of that massive move down. We just, as I'm speaking, we're breaking this 4-hour demand zone right now. And look, this zone was old. I was pointing the zone out to members, like full disclosure, I was pointing the zone to members like back here. Now, getting a pullback after we break trend all the way over here, it's kind of a different story, especially after seeing such a aggressive move down. These zones can just blast through, which we are seeing right now. It's definitely a possibility. So what do we do in these situations? Well, just a warning, whenever we get massive drops like this in the markets, it makes it very difficult to trade the upcoming weeks for a few reasons. One, because, well, zones are just blasting through and it's kind of out of our control. And not only that, the nearest supply is all the way up here, and it's basically just a supply zone created from an economic data or news or Trump saying something. So it's going to be a difficult couple weeks. I will probably say that. So you're definitely going to have to be patient. And I just wouldn't simply be catching this falling knife right now. What I'd be doing is simply be looking for confirmation on the lower timeframes, like the day trading timeframes. Now, we had a nice short trade here off of this S&P 500. I personally don't short the S&P 500, but this was a trading setup that I called out in the daily market breakdown video. As you can see, the Zoom session from yesterday, I did point out this 1-hour area of supply. I was telling members that if you're going to short the supply zone, I'd be looking for like a 1-to-1. So I'm sure some of them got, way more than a 1-to-1, but I just want to say, like I wrote here, it's a lucky trade. I mean, it was not a lucky trade. I was expecting a small move. However, if you caught this entire move, that is, I don't want to say pure luck because you got a nice entry at the top, but it was definitely a lucky move. And yeah, I called it the zone before, but I wasn't expecting this. Okay. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, look at this beautiful trade, right? I'm not trying to say that. But this thing is just absolutely falling off of a cliff right now, and I just simply don't know where it's going to go. Hopefully for next week's forecast, we will have more zones formed. It sucks that this was the first forecast for the S&P 500, and I just don't see any setups, but that's all part of the game anyways, right? Sometimes a forecast equals there's no trades, and that's the reality. So stay tuned for more forecasts on the S&P 500. We absolutely nail it with zones on the S&P usually, but when we get moves like this, it's very, very unpredictable. So it's going to be a difficult couple weeks, but stay tuned. We should have some better trading setups to come. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the USDJPY. A little bit of a weekly chart here. I really don't love this time frame. There's really no trend. We're sitting right in the middle of like the previous high and low. Very difficult to determine what to do based off of this weekly time frame. So there's not a lot of confluence to go off of on that weekly time frame. However, on the daily chart, we had a pretty nice range here. We almost wicked into this this demand, and then we just blasted out of this range. And that gave us a very nice daily upward trend. So in my opinion, longs are going to be preferred here as long as this trend line is being respected on the daily time frame, and as long as this demand zone is holding as well. Now, this is a little hidden demand zone. I know people aren't going to agree. It's not even a red candle. Well, make sure you subscribe so you can watch my forecast to see the power of single candle basing, even if it's a green candle for demand or a single red candle for supply. Some of the members can definitely write in the comments the power of those single candle zones. So if you guys are members, write in the comments, let them know. So the daily demand down below at 150.31, it's a pretty good zone. I like the move away. We're getting kind of an aggressive pullback into it, which is fine. And I know nobody really likes to enter on an entire daily zone, and that's completely fine. So you could be looking for H1 confirmation inside of this daily demand. You could even be looking for day trades in there as well. I just prefer to swing trade. That is my thing. So it's a great place to day trade, H1 trades as well, looking for confirmation. And that's something we'll be looking for in the daily market breakdown videos throughout the week for the Diamond members. If you want to trade alongside myself and the members, join the Diamond membership, where you will have access to the 38-page supply and demand zone PDF, which will be your complete trading guide, the daily market breakdown videos, which are forecasts that I release every single night for the members to trade alongside myself, step-by-step video lessons A to Z covering everything you need to know on supply and demand trading, the Sunday strategy Zoom session where members submit homework, and it's an interactive 1-hour call where we go over all of your homework and every trading related question, private access to myself inside of our private Discord group where I answer all of your trading related questions, and finally the Sunday live stream forecast where we break down over 30 markets together. And it's not just me. Here are some of the members and some of their trades they've been taking lately, absolutely killing it. And we also have some amazing reviews from some of the past members sharing their experience within the group. So if you're ready to trade alongside myself and the community, join the Diamond membership today. Links in the description down below. So we just need to wait for this daily demand zone to be hit to continue to look for longs. And as far as trading it goes now, I would just simply be waiting for that zone to be hit, because zooming out, looking at my 4-hour chart and the 1-hour chart, I just don't see any setups until we can hit that daily zone. And it's been nothing but a whole lot of momentum to the upside and a whole lot of nothing going on. So I'm excited to see a pullback down to that daily zone to see if we can get a nice trading setup. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the GBPUSD on the weekly time frame. We've been talking about this weekly zone. Beautiful reaction off of the weekly zone, but we came back in for a second test. Sometimes we will see moves off of a zone when we get a second test. However, when we get a test this deep, that kind of changes my opinion. I usually will, so let's say this zone was fresh, let's ignore all this, and we came and we just wicked the zone like this. I would expect to see maybe another small move off the zone before we end up breaking it. However, since the zone is tested very deep, I wouldn't be surprised if we just kind of blast through it. We are kind of seeing a move off of it so far right now. However, I think it could be short-lived. On the daily time frame, we got a beautiful reaction off of our daily area of supply. You can see I had this one on my charts last week and last week's weekly Forex forecast, I believe. So nice daily supplies on there, nice move to the downside. So it is definitely looking pretty weak. So how do we go about and trade the British pound right now? Well, we have a couple options. We have a nice 4-hour downward trend line. It looks like we might be starting to test the trend line right now. And what I will say is, as long as this downward trend line is holding, 15-minute time frame shorts are going to be good. We have an older 4-hour demand zone back here. It would be an aggressive entry, right? Look how long it's taken for price to pull back to the zone. So if you want to get in long at this demand zone, you can. A couple things I would prefer is this. So what I would like to see is something like this. Boom. Create some sort of liquidity here where it's a support out level where all the stop losses are. Then we hop on long. That would be something I would prefer to see before getting in long at such an old zone like this. And if you are going to get in long at the zone, I would be looking for like a 1-to-1 1 to 2 would be making sense to me, or at least just be aggressive with moving your stop to break even because it is counter trend. If we break the trend line like this, any demand zone there, it actually could be a potentially good trading opportunity. That is basically going to be a 4-hour confirmation coming off of the weekly demand that we are inside of. It's a tested weekly demand zone, so it's not my favorite situation, but that is what we could be waiting for if we break the 4-hour downward trend line. We have a decent 4-hour supply zone sitting up above at 1.36 as well, so that could be another potential trading opportunity if we do, push up to that area of supply above. Now, on the 1-hour chart, we had a nice reaction off of our 1-hour trend line there. And as long as that downward trend line's holding, I think looking for shorts on a 5-minute time frame, going to be completely fine. We have a couple fresh zones up here. However, they're making me very nervous because we almost got a test off of them. But if we do pull up to this supply zone, that would be our nearest term short trade at 1.34. And there's a zone just above it at 1.342. So a couple 1-hour supply zones there. Level on top of level, kind of a sticky and weird situation. So you could either trade both and accept that you could lose both trades. You could accept that maybe you lose this one and win this one and let your risk reward play out. That'd be fine as well. You could simply just put your stop above both of them. That's fine. But remember, there's pros and cons. If you do this, then your risk reward just becomes worse, which is fine. It's just pros and cons. So or what I would prefer to do if you were a day trader, just look for confirmation inside of them on a 5-minute time frame. That's kind of might save you from a couple losses or tell you which zone is going to work best. But for now, we definitely want to be watching the 1-hour downward trend line and the 2 1-hour supply zones, as well as the 4-hour downward trend line. All right, moving on to the forecast for the USDCAD. This is where I am from. This is where I currently live. Let me know where you guys are from in the comments down below. Maybe some of you guys could connect. On the weekly time frame here, weekly demand and control, weekly trend line being respected. Yes, I call this respected, that trend line. So nice move to the upside off of that. It is looking very, very strong. I was talking about this last week. Not only do we have that weekly zone in control, but we broke out of this range and out of this range, giving us a nice trend line on the daily time frame, finally. So this trend line is going to be pretty much our life support, I guess you could say, or I don't know really what else to call it, but it's going to be kind of our guide to see, at least for swing trading, where we could expect the USDCAD to go. What you could be doing is monitoring this 4-hour upward trend line. As long as this 4-hour upward trend line is holding, I think looking for longs on a 15-minute time frame is going to be completely fine. So that's basically the trend line I would be monitoring. If you want to get aggressive, I like this zone as far as the move away goes. It makes me nervous because of the fact that there was a lot of trading in this area, this general area. So it's a decent zone. The basing is great. The move away is it's as good as it's going to get. The issue again is how much trading was in the area. So it makes me nervous. So confirmation might be best inside of this zone on a 5-minute time frame. I think that would just be a little bit more safe based off of everything I just explained. But it's a good zone. You could take a stab at the entire zone. I think that's reasonable just based on the fact that the move away is so good. Might want to stop below all of that, though, to kind of just be a little bit more conservative. And if you have a wider stop, that's fine in this situation because you're trading with a daily trend. It's not like you're looking for just a quick move. So I think we could see a larger move off of that zone if we do get the pullback down to that zone on the USDCAD. Moving on to the forecast for the Aussie US dollar. This weekly time frame is a great example of, let's say this was your entry time frame. I would never be, there's no trading setups here. As far as supply and demand goes, whatever strategy you're trading, maybe there is. As far as what supply and demand traders go, there's nothing here and there's nothing there. We had a nice supply zone above, but there was really, it's just been a whole lot of nothing on the weekly chart. So I like to show these charts to show you guys what we don't really want to be looking for. On the daily time frame, we did create a new daily downward trend line. So that is, I like to see trend lines for 2 reasons, because it shows us the trend and then it shows us what removes that trend line, which is very significant in my opinion. So definitely a bearish sign as we created a new daily downward trend line. To me, it looks like we will be pulling all the way back down to this daily zone at 0.644. How big of a move are we going to get off this zone? Very difficult to tell. Why? Because going back to that terrible weekly chart I was just pointing out, there's nothing here, right? If, let's say, we had a nice weekly trend line to the upside, or weekly demand was here, then I would say, wow, we could expect probably a big move off of this demand zone. But we don't have that. So if you want to get in long in this zone, again, we want to be looking for confirmation probably on an H1 chart, but I'd be aggressive with trade management off of a zone like that, not only because it's counter trend, but because there's no higher time frame confluence to go with as well. So for now, it is looking very weak on the Aussie, and obviously Friday, guys, we've seen massive spikes down in the market, and it can be very, very troubling, especially for beginner traders. But I've been trading for 6 years now, and look, this is all part of the game. These market conditions can change, and if you need help with your trading psychology, which if you don't have good trading psychology, you will not make it, straight up. So if you want help with that, check out my Stoic Trading Psychology podcast, which is a podcast I try to do a lot of episodes on. Been struggling with, so I would like your guys' support. If you want me to do more, let me know. Check out the podcast anywhere you get your podcast. I also made a YouTube channel for it as well. It can definitely help with the trading psychology aspect side of things, especially after seeing massive moves like this. Now we are into a old 4-hour zone. You can see we barely tested this zone before, so I'm not really expecting too big of a move off of this zone. And something interesting, we have a fresh zone down here at 0.643 and an even better zone down at 0.64. These are two very good zones. The only issue is it's been so long since we've pulled back into them. So I think they're good enough for quick 1-to-1 trades, maybe 2-to-1 if you get lucky with moving your stop loss. But again, what I would prefer to see is some sort of support trap before the zone. Then I think we could actually see a bigger move, like 3-to-1 off of those zones. So that is what I'll be looking for as we contact these two areas of demand on the Aussie US dollar. And if you are bearish, you really could be just day trading short on a 15-minute time frame until we contact these demand zones down below. I think that would be a reasonable option. The only problem is, again, it might feel like you're chasing, based off of the aggressive move that we have had. So I do prefer the shorts kind of at the top of this entire channel that we kind of have created on the Aussie US dollar. And on the 1-hour time frame, we do have a little hidden base drop 1-hour area of supply at 0.653. So if you like to trade the 1-hour charts, that's our supply zone right there. It's a very nice hidden supply. I like the move away. I like the little hidden candle basing there. I like that. Confirmation here on a 5-minute time frame could be good as well, but I think it's decent enough for a potential set and forget trade as well. And if we remove that supply, any demand is going to be a pretty good demand zone for a potential long trade. All right, on to the forecast for the USDCHF. Not quite getting the exact same move we've seen in the DXY, but it is a similar looking chart. Weekly demands in control, very old weekly zone, so nothing too crazy that I'm really basing my trading decisions off of on the Swiss. We have a daily downward trend line that was removed right here, but looks like it might have been a fake out as we've immediately pushed back into it. Sometimes when we break out of trend lines, if we just get an immediate push back in, to me that tells me it was just some sort of fake out. So we got to be a little bit cautious with that. We have a couple ways to view this chart. If you are bullish, as long as this trend line's holding on a 4-hour time frame, 15-minute time frame longs are going to be good. If we do retrace up to this 4-hour supply zone, I think it could be good for a short trade as well. Just going to tighten up the zone just a bit. So again, it is counter trend to this 4-hour time frame. However, it did remove demand, and the basing is decent, and the move away is very good as well. So could be a decent supply zone for a potential short trade. Again, we got to be cautious with all of these zones that were created on Friday because they were created based off of economic news. So not the best zones. Confirmation in all of these is going to be much better, guys. So we definitely need to keep that in mind. But for now, it's looking pretty strong still, at least on this 4-hour time frame. So we want to monitor that 4-hour trend line I was talking about, and then that 4-hour supply zone for a potential short. And look, going back to the 4-hour time frame really quick, if let's say we break out of this supply zone, we break the high, any demand zone there is going to be a very good 4-hour demand zone trade for potential long to trade with this overall trend. All right, looking at the forecast for crude oil, guys, we basically just broke this weekly area of demand as I speak. I'm not too surprised based off of we did get a nice move off of it initially. However, when we couldn't really break out, to me, it was looking like it was going to break, and we did just that. the issue with oil is I just don't see anything for good zones. I mean, this is a very good demand zone back here. It's just kind of a random weekly zone in the middle of nothing. So actually with this support level, we're kind of creating a support level here. So what I would like to see is if we can get a reaction to kind of prove there's more liquidity here, then I actually put more weight on this demand zone at 53.85. Again, I like that I removed the trend line. It's a very good demand zone as far as that goes, and it's a nice move away. But again, I want to see proven liquidity here. That would make me more confident in a zone that's old like this. So that's what I would prefer to see on crude oil at this time. Again, it's a whole weekly zone, so you're not going to be taking it anyways. If price does pull back to this weekly zone, we're looking for H4 or H1 confirmation. That's just what I would be doing if we do pull back to it. Nice daily downward trend line here. So that is it's gonna kind of be our guide as far as where oil is going to go mid to long term. As long as this daily downward trend line is holding, shorts are going to be preferred. Doesn't mean we can't get in long. It just means that if you're going to get in long, you want to be aggressive with trade management, and it means if you're going to short, you could be less aggressive with trade management and look for larger trades. Now, as far as trading decisions go, we have a nice 4-hour downward trend line. We have a very old zone from back here. We have a very nice 4-hour downward trend line. It's pretty much picture perfect. I love it. And as long as that's holding, 15-minute time frame shorts are good. And we also have a 4-hour supply zone above at 61.17, and that would be our nearest zone for a potential short trade. Even if we break above all of this, we have another kind of hidden supply zone above at 64.78 that I think could be good as well. But on that one, since it's kind of an old zone, I'd be maybe more aggressive with trade management and have a wider stop on that one. I think that'd be fine. If you want to be less aggressive with trade management on this supply zone, I would just have a wider stop. It's really that simple. So a couple 4-hour supply zones there on oil. And like I mentioned earlier, you could look for longs. But the only way I'd be looking for longs, at least in this 4-hour time frame, is if we get something like this. Preferably removing the downward trend line and the supply zone. Any demand zone there would be a decent counter trend long trade. Or even if, let's say, we push down here, we just break the trend line, that would be a potential good long trade as well. But again, it's counter trend. So if that does take place and you want to get in long, I would just be more aggressive with trade management. And that's how I would view crude oil. All right, on to the forecast. Last but not least, Bitcoin. Crazy to say doing a forecast on Bitcoin, but I've received so many comments, add Bitcoin. So I wanted to add the S&P 500 and Bitcoin. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. And again, subscribe to the channel if you want my forecast on Bitcoin every single week. As far as supply and demand goes, Bitcoin has been very well-respected supply and demand. Called out that zone from down there. We haven't quite seen moves off of these zones here. Nice move off of this zone, but I mean, look at what happened on Friday. Literally, like an hour ago, it wasn't looking that bad on Bitcoin. I mean, it wasn't looking great, but it wasn't looking that bad. So as long as this weekly trend line's holding, I think longs are much preferred on Bitcoin. The question now is, will we break this demand zone and will we potentially pull back down to this weekly demand zone at 97.93? I think it's a good area of demand to look for potential long trades on Bitcoin. Now, we had a very nice daily zone here. I put a lot of weight on this daily zone. The issue is, again, all of this stuff going on Friday. It's just it's like a wild card. It's like the Wild West, especially with Trump in office. It's like, who knows what is going to happen. And so it's just part of the market conditions, and it's part of trading. We can expect to see things like this. Now we have a new daily supply zone above, but like I had mentioned on oil, these supply zones that are being created here on Friday are results of economic data or economic news and just pure emotion. So it's really not the best zones, but they could potentially work at 121.722. But as far as Bitcoin goes, look at this sideways action we are in right now. I really don't know what I would be doing. It's really that simple. And like I was telling you guys earlier, when we get big moves like this, it is very difficult to get trading decisions. I mean, things were looking really great. We had zones being respected all the way up. Of course, we had loss, win. This was actually a winning trade that I called out in the Sunday forecast for the Diamond members, and one of the members actually caught a beautiful setup off of that zone. So again, we will take losses, obviously, right? Loss, win. It's all about risk to reward. So when we get these massive moves down, it's very difficult to get zones. And I'm actually surprised we did create a 1 hour supply zone at 116.34. So this would be our nearest term short trade. Again, next week is going to be very difficult. I don't like trading after such an aggressive move down or up. An emotion, it can make things all out of whack, and it can basically throw technical analysis all out the window. But again, it's all part of the game. So this would be our nearest 1 hour area of supply. Again, if you don't feel comfortable, just look for confirmation inside of here on a 5-minute time frame. I think that would be completely reasonable. Again, I don't really want to be saying you should be day trading short. Like, we're clearly just chasing at this point. So I think waiting for some supply zones to be hit, that's just going to be much, much more favorable. But obviously, price is just absolutely tanking. So it's very, very difficult to be determining what is going on in the markets right now. So we pretty much have to go again with our higher time frames, which are showing the supply zone above and the weekly demand zone down below. And when we aren't pulling back into anything, it's very difficult to trade. So I would just wait for that 1 hour supply zone, look for a potential short. If we break the supply, if we have a demand zone, great. We want to be looking for longs because of the weekly trend. So our bias definitely is to the long side, but for now, we need to wait for some zones to be hit or just look for shorts and maybe ride the potential momentum to the downside. But remember, shorts are always going to be lower odds when we are trading against a higher time frame trend. So not a lot going on Bitcoin. Even the S&P 500, it was kind of a bad week to add the two, honestly, but it is what it is. I plan on adding it anyways, and I hope you guys subscribe to the channel so you can continue to watch my forecast on the S&P 500 and Bitcoin. I know there wasn't not a lot going on, but stay tuned. There will be more going on to come in the next coming weeks. If you guys want access to my full-length forecast, join the Diamond membership where you will have access to that, as well as my daily market forecast, the full course supply and demand PDF, and much, much more. Make sure you guys subscribe so you can catch next week's forecast as well. And I always appreciate a like. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.